Throughout the 80s and early 90s, beat-em-ups were king of the arcades before fighting games totally knocked them off their block. However, for the Nintendo, it took a while before they really learned how to program for the system and make some great ones. Today, I'm going to take a look at a lot of them. I am the Game Collector, and this is Second Opinion Games, and today we're looking at NES beat-em-ups.
Second Opinion Games.
Let me be clear of what I'm talking about by beat-em-ups here. If you're moving on a single plane like Bad Street Brawler, I am not going to include it, even though that's the only thing you do in this entire game. It's also quite ridiculous, and I don't recommend anyone playing it because it's quite offensive to the ears to just listen to the music here, let alone the weird controls and moves at your disposal. And you're also beating up some really weird-looking people, too. Instead, I'm talking about the beat-em-ups that you move in a three-dimensional space, and, well, you'll see. Double Dragon was the key beat-em-up for the NES. It was also the key beat-em-up in the arcade. And the third one, the graphics look about the best, but the game is just plain hard. You also flip around like a freaking ninja. These guys weren't ninjas, were they? Well, at least not until much later games. And there is a Battletoads Double Dragon game, but I think I'm going to look at the first one, or the Chuck Norris version of the first one for the ROM hack, because that is clearly the best Double Dragon game that could be played on the NES, because you're playing as Chuck Norris, beating the crap out of everyone. Seriously, if you knock a single person down, they are out, which means you could plow through the game much faster than you could in the original Double Dragon game, and that's exactly what it needs. Now you don't have to spend hours mastering the back elbow in order to kill a Bobo. No, you just punch him in the face and it's over. Now the only time you're probably gonna die is when you get hit with all those sliding blocks. What are they supposed to be anyway? This doesn't even make any sense. Target Renegade might look like a generic Double Dragon, but I'm gonna say it's definitely not, because the controls are just plain stiff. Also, they throw these motorcycles at you right from the beginning of the game, and you have to jump kick them just right in order to knock them off the bikes. If you even manage to get past this, well, you have more patience than I do, because I hate these things so freaking much. Eventually, I do clear the first level, and they just throw more and more motorcycles at you. It would be one thing if jumping was easy, but you generally have to press both the buttons at the same time in order to do it, and I really hate this game. The Toxic Crusaders was an unusual game to be made on the NES. The Toxic Avenger films, if they weren't rated R, well then they weren't rated at all, because they were so low budget and low energy and just plain stupid that I can't believe anyone would enjoy them. Well, they were enjoyable for bad films, but definitely not high quality cinema. Now, the Toxic Crusaders was based off of a cartoon that ran for practically no time whatsoever. I think they only made a few episodes. So, what about this game? Well, the controls are simple. You have one button to swing your mop around, because for some reason your mop is your main choice of weapon. However, if you get hit, you lose it immediately. But it's super weak, so you have to hit people extra hard with the select button. This makes the game virtually impossible, because you have to claw your controller. I guess that's the way to play it. And I really don't like playing with a claw grip. So you have to hit the select button, and then you have to hit the A button to jump, and it just gets really annoying really quick. It's also ridiculously difficult on top of the awkward controls. Prisoner of War, or P.O.W, is a bit more playable. You can punch everyone with your fists. The graphics look good. Of course, it's made by SNK, and they made some of the classics on the old NES. You could even pick up a machine gun and fire from the hip like you're some type of crazy 80s action star. They also add a bit more explorability here, because you could go into the back of trucks or maybe in rooms trying to look for more power-ups as you play through the game. And when you come to a boss battle, or at least the first one, you have a helicopter to show down against, which will drop grenades, and you have to pick them up to use them as the weapon in order to destroy the helicopter. This one is a heck of a lot of fun, and SNK was really shining here. Batman Returns was the third best Batman game on the NES, which technically makes it the worst Batman game, and yes, you still have some motorcycles that you have to jump kick off. However, if you hit the select button, you do have some batarangs to throw, but they're in a very limited amount. You also have a grappling hook, so there is some potential for exploring levels, but most of the time you're just going to be punching clowns in the face. You can punch Catwoman in the face too, but that's a little bit later in the game. There's a little bit of storyline sprinkled throughout, but if you already watched the Batman movie, well then you probably don't need to be playing this game. Also, the Super Nintendo had a much better version, so don't waste your time with this one. Even if you can do a super power cape move and take out most of the bosses quickly, it's really not worth your time. Battletoads is one of the must-have NES beat-em-ups. Everything moves faster than previous games that I talked about here. The graphics look incredible, and punching everyone feels really fluid. You could also have different types of stages, like those speeder stages that everyone hates, or a little mine shaft that you can move around, 1 to 2 player, which you could then beat up your best friend and completely shatter your friendship into a million pieces. And also, one of the most interesting boss battles I think I ever played, because you get to fight it in a second-person view. That means looking through the eyes of what is trying to kill you while you pick up giant boulders and throw them at the machine itself. This is some of the most incredible thinking out of the box in video games I think I've ever seen, and even though the game is ridiculously difficult, I just keep coming back to it. The NES couldn't do Final Fight style graphics, but what it could do is something else. With Mighty Final Fight, we got everything so cutesy-ified. Mike Hagar looks just plain ridiculous. He can still do all of his karate-like moves, and he just punches everyone in the face like a true beat-em-up. But it really doesn't sit well with me. There's only about 3 characters on screen at any point in time. It's a whole one-player experience, and it just feels generic. I'm sorry, I want to get into this, and most people call it a true hidden gem, but it just feels way too average, especially after playing Battletoads. Why would anyone want to play this? Especially because there's a great version on the Sega CD, or at least a good one on the Super Nintendo. Renegade. Well, I feel pretty bad for you if this is the only fighting game you had. At least they mixed up the controls a little bit. You used the B button to punch to the left or kick to the left, and you use the A button to punch or kick to the right. You could also get teamed up really fast by opponents, but because you could switch your attacks back and forth so fast, it's okay for about 10 seconds because you will lose and lose fast. No, River City Ransom is the spiritual successor to it, and they completely knocked it out of the park with this one by adding in some RPG elements. As you beat up people, you can pick up coins and use them to buy different power-ups that will boost your stamina or your strength, or maybe even your health itself, which means if you really know what you're doing here, you could completely ace your way through the game in no time and making it one of the simplest beat-em-ups of all times. It also happens to be pretty much everyone's favorite beat-em-up on the system if it wasn't for our next game. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. It was called 2 because the first one wasn't a beat-em-up at all. It was just a completely new game for the NES. They also made a third one, which is just as good as this one, if not a little bit better, but I really like playing this one for nostalgia reasons. It's kind of like the arcade version. They did add in some extra levels on top of the arcade version, so in some ways this one's better, other than the fact that the graphics and somewhat of the controls, but that's neither here or there. What is there is the fact that this is a fun, great game with some of the best sprite work that the Nintendo has ever done, and some interesting special effects with fire along the bottom of the screen. If you haven't played the Turtles fighting games, well then you should definitely go out and buy the Turtles Cowabunga collection, because that's a collection of all of the very best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games that was on the Nintendo and the 16-bit systems alike. And the Turtles may always go down as having the very best NES beat-em-up games of all times. But for me, I like those weird hidden gems, and I really like Lethal Weapon, made by Ocean. This is the only Ocean game I actually like. Normally, movie-based games at the time were completely terrible, and I understand if you want to make fun of this, because graphically, this is nothing special at all. Also, you have a gun, and you have your fists. Your fists seem to do a bit more damage than the gun, so what's the point? Well, the gun has a little bit of range. Also, everyone can be beat down with just a few short slaps of your fist. After all, you are playing as a Vietnam vet with PTSD, and he can really kick a lot of butt. However, if you walk off to the left side of the screen, well, then you can come out as Sergeant Murtaugh himself and just start kicking everyone's butt extra hard, because he does feel more powerful, which means you have 2 life bars that you can manage back and forth. Sometimes if you're off the screen for a good bit of time, your life bar can replenish on the one character while playing as the other, but you still have to manage your ammo. Occasionally, a helicopter will come, and of course, you have to pick up grenades and throw it back at the helicopter. At least I think that's what it is. You never really see the whole thing, just a little tiny bit at the top of the screen. There's also power-ups that you can pick up, like a body armor vest. There's some platforming here, but it never feels terrible because the controls are just perfect. So a lot of times you might judge a book by its cover and see Ocean and a crappy licensed game, and you might think it's total crap, but sometimes it will surprise you with Lethal Weapon. Probably the only NES game that you can play from start to finish as a black guy. And that's why it is my favorite beat-em-up on the original Nintendo. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a great time making it, playing that Chuck Norris version of Double Dragon. It's hard to stop playing that. The Turtles is great. River City Ransom is insanely good. And the hidden gem of the bunch is Lethal Weapon, which is one of the most interesting games. You could also pick up knives as Mel Gibson's character, and Danny Glover's character can pick up boxes. I forgot to mention that earlier. It's just one of those little things, and the little things that add up that keep the game switching up. Guys jumping out of holes. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this game anymore. I want you to explore it for yourselves. And even though it starts off easy, it does get painfully difficult towards the end. So, what is your favorite beat 'em up for the NES or even the Super NES? I really want to know. And until later, I will see you again, guys.